There are so many books to get to. So many. Shakespeare's plays, everything after Beowulf. I want to read Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series, but there is not enough time in the day for me to get to all of these things. If you're anything like me, there are so many books that you want to get to, and you know you're probably not going to get to the majority of them. There are roughly 7 reasons for this, and I'm going to get to each of them in this video. The main thing that gets in the way is that books take a lot of time to read, and life's pretty short. Just think about checking out a book from the library. That's a very real time constraint. You have to turn it back in. New books are expensive, and I certainly can't afford to spend between 30 and 40 bucks on a hardcover book every time I finish something and need something new to read. There's work, we have relationships, these things matter. And so the list of things I hear about and that I want to read, but that I know I'm not going to get to anytime soon, just keeps getting longer and longer the older I get. And because life is so short, that list starts to get really intimidating, let alone some of the individual titles that are on the list. I want to read Ulysses, I want to read The Underworld, I want to read a lot of stuff written by Flaubert. When am I ever going to get to all of those titles? Not only are some of those books really long, they're also extremely complicated. I'm reading all of Shakespeare's plays right now, or chipping away at them as best I can, and I need to have a recording of the performances to listen to while I'm reading through. Otherwise, it's a little too confusing. I misunderstand key beats and moments in the story, and also it's just a lot less fun to read the text on the page. And when all of these things that I want to read are long and complicated, and I have so many other things to do, it gets really easy to put books down just because of their length. I can just pick up my phone and look at anything else that I want instead of plowing through a really dense paragraph. I make that choice to put a book down just so I can scroll some feed every single day. But also, the more books I leave unfinished and the more series I leave unfinished, the more projects I have out there for me to get to one day. If I do something like start reading all of Shakespeare's plays, that's such a tall task that it may never end. I may never read all of Shakespeare's plays. I probably will, but I might not. And there's comfort in knowing that there's at least a little bit more out there to get into if I so choose. That's the reason why I haven't read a lot of Tolkien's additional writings beyond the trilogy and The Hobbit. I really want to read the Silmarillion, and I really want to imagine the full world, but if I leave it unread for myself, then I'm essentially saving it for later. There's always a fear that I have, too, that the deeper I get into a TV series or a book series, that I'll just be disappointed. Breaking Bad is one of the few examples I can think of a series that only kept getting better and that didn't let me down along the way. Pretty much every other series that I've ever gotten into has involved some disappointment, and that's especially true for book series. Not so much trilogies, though. I feel like the Border trilogy, The Lord of the Rings, these are good series that I enjoyed. Beyond all of those factors, which are enough already, I'm also so conditioned to consuming media, like on my phone, on a computer, that even though I'm a lifelong reader and I am a writer and I spend hours a day doing these things, I feel more and more friction the older I get. I'm not even that old, to putting everything else aside, keeping the room I'm in quiet, or just putting on some light instrumental music and reading a book. It's tough to put everything down. And there's one more reason too why I don't read enough books, as many books as I would like to. And this particularly applies to rereading books. I don't want to mess with the idea that I have of a story, especially things that I read when I was younger. If I read something by a writer and had an amazing experience with it, sometimes I don't want to dig into other works by them. I just want to be able to leave that memory on the shelf and let it be the pure thing that it is. But also, the older I get, the less guilty I feel about all of this stuff. When I really get into a story, I want it all. I want everything there is to know about the world that I'm imagining, and I want to hear the writer say everything that they've ever had to say about it. I get a little obsessed. I think these feelings, at least that I have towards reading, and maybe it's the same for you as well, ultimately get caught up with fear and guilt, like, I should have finished this thing, or why did I put that book down? But in the grand scheme of things, isn't it enough to be reading anything? When I stop thinking about books in terms of, I should have finished that, I would have finished that, but I had this project at work, and instead I just focus on the reading that I am doing, the 30 minutes or an hour that I carved out in the morning before work, or the few pages of the novel I'm reading that I'm definitely going to read before I crash at night. Using that framework, none of these other hang-ups really matter all that much. They become pretty inconsequential. There's too much material out there, and I'm not going to get to everything. But when I can get to something, and I do, that's enough for me. At least when I'm thinking clearly it is. I hope this video finds you in a good reading groove. Happy reading, and I'll see you in the next video.